Many people feel like they have to force themselves to do work, and I don't think this needs to be the case. Different ways you might try to force yourself include waiting for a deadline to pressure yourself. This is where you feel like you need to have your back up against the wall to do your best. Maybe you try faking deadlines. For example, you have a number of things coming up and you have to try to figure out how to do them all. Well, maybe I'll fake a deadline in order to make it work. Unfortunately, that doesn't work very well. Maybe you hope that you'll take an interest in the meantime while that thing is waiting for you on the horizon. You can try forcing yourself to start that I just need to start. That often doesn't work. And then when you're there, if you happen to stumble into it, or if the deadline has pushed you to this point, you might feel like you have to force yourself to continue until you're done, because you don't know how you're going to get back. You might ask for other people to force you, for other people to push you, to say, hey, go do that thing over and over. And that can be set up consciously or unconsciously between people and often creates resentment. And then, of course, there's shaming oneself, trying to remind yourself of all the past failures in hopes that maybe if you felt bad enough, you'd start working. But there is a different way, one that allows you to go at your own pace, something dictated internally, which often allows you to access more creative parts of yourself, something where you start to enjoy the work, where you start feeling like you can have play in the work, where the best types of work start to come alive. There's intuition that comes with this, a sense of, oh, I have an idea. And then there's the being in charge of your own type of challenge with it. When you have your own pace, you can have those days where you don't feel very into it, and you have other days where you're like, bring it on. You can go at a more steady flow rather than a chaotic pace. You can engage in a steadier flow too, not a chaotic one that's often created by the deadlines that are around you. A steady flow is more being in it at, again, your pace, but in a way too that allows you to connect with other things that might be going on when and where you need to. It's a deeply internal sort of way of engaging. It's something that you get to be in charge of. And when you do this, when you practice this, oftentimes you can beat deadlines well in advance with much less worry. You can begin this change in your approach with what I call a visit. It's a small shift, but small shifts can make for big changes. When a ship's course adjusts by only a few degrees, given time, it can wind up in a very different place. To break free from fear and force-based methods of work is not a simple process, but the start can be. It can be this small shift. And again, when you practice this, you start to return agency to yourself. Instead of being stuck with a project and its dimensions, you start being in charge of the work that you choose and going at the pace that you want. A visit is probably something you've done before and not realized doing so. You've probably seen it in a number of different ways throughout your life and not considered that it could be a tremendous force in your life, that it can become sometimes an entire way of working. You can start arranging your days around visits and making it so that your work is at your pace, where you enjoy things, where you can start feeling more spontaneous, more clearly say no where you need to, and more. A visit is simply this. You choose a thing to be with, and you be with it. Preferably with distractions set aside, for at least a single deep breath of time. That's it. You have the option of nudging it forward, a little tiny something here and a little tiny something there. Maybe that'll turn into a flow. You don't have to do any of the work. And if you're not done with it by the time you want to step away, you can schedule the next visit if you'd like, maybe for tomorrow. Another way of phrasing this is show up and then decide. Show up to the thing and then decide if you want to engage it or not. You get to keep your sense of agency, your sense of decision at all times. You never have to fool yourself. You never have to force yourself. You never have to trick yourself. The only bind, if there is a bind, is in showing up at all. It may not seem like much to show up and do nothing. What's the point? But every visit you make creates a wave of focus with a beginning, middle, and end. Whether it's a difficult trudge, smooth sailing, choppy, scattered, easygoing, whatever it is, each wave is infinitely more than no wave at all. And what's neat is that you don't have to feel like it. You don't have to say, I don't have the energy. You tune into the work or not as you are there. If you still don't feel like it, that's fine, so long as you were there for that single conscious deep breath of time. You've made a visit. Imagine as if you were on a boat. There's this beginning phase where you're approaching the wave, this wave of focus with which you might engage. And you reach this edge of action. This is the point where it's as easy to say no as it is to say yes, as easy it is to nudge it forward as it is to walk away. If you can be there, if you can reach that single deep breath at the edge of action, you may even discover this little place where some curiosity takes hold. This little, well, what if I did this? What if I just did that? And sometimes that becomes a thing. Here at that edge of action, you get the sense maybe even of this tipping of the roller coaster, this tendril of play or engagement that's ready to emerge. And of course, if you do happen to nudge it forward, maybe that'll be nice. Particularly for difficult matters, maybe that nudge is really small, something like writing your name on it, brushing some dust aside. Those feelings of challenge, interest, novelty, the things that start that engagement, might begin to stir. You don't often have to wait for them to magically show up. Many times they're waiting for you. Now, if those nudges turn into a full work session, wonderful. There becomes this middle phase where we're in it. We're in play, work, flow. We're creative, we're discovering, exploring, engaged, maybe challenged. And you can leave at any time, whenever you feel like. Maybe set things aside for another visit, preferably the next day. If you're not done, nothing happens, all of that's fine. When you can start making visits the next day, you can keep going at your pace, tuning into its pace. Again, able to stop at any point in time. Every visit brings you closer to resolving the vision of that report, that project, that habit, that skill, that thing you're learning, whatever it is you're working on. Every visit creates and builds momentum, a set of larger and larger waves that you can start guiding over time from one day to the next. These gentle waves of repetition carve mountains. What might be surprising is that between visits, too, these waves, our unconscious mind starts to work behind the scenes. Ideas bubble up beyond some threshold of consciousness. Ideas and emotions sometimes crystallize into new perspectives. We have those aha moments. And at some point, it'll either be done, or you can consciously decide, I don't want to do this anymore. When you can do this, when you can start something as early as possible, maybe even the day it's been assigned, believe it or not, you might even be able to finish things well before deadlines. Again, with much less stress, anxiety, and otherwise, using this simple process. If you're interested in learning more, check out wavesoffocus.com/free PDF. You can get yourself a free PDF called Your First Steps to Breaking Free from Force-Based Work. I do hope that this shift, this exercise, this attempt might help you to move away from a very stressful mode of working towards one that feels more freeing and engaging and enjoyable.